Famous explorers in history. In pre-modern times, people on different sides of the world barely knew about other nations and cultures. All this changed thanks to the famous explorers of the Age of Discovery. Let's look at the pioneering explorers first with this list of the most famous explorers in history. Number 1. Abel Tasman. A Dutch explorer who lived in the 17th century, he served as a captain under the Dutch East India Company. He became especially famous for his voyages in 1642 and 1644 to the South Pacific Ocean. In these voyages, he discovered Fiji, New Zealand, and Tasmania. Now, Tasman did not actually name Tasmania after himself. In fact, he originally named the island Van Diemen's Land after his corporate sponsor, Anthony van Diemen. It wasn't until 1856 that the island gained its modern name under British rule. Ironically, despite his historical accomplishments, the Dutch East India Company found Tasman's discoveries disappointing. This resulted from the lack of easily exploited resources or opportunities for large-scale trade. Tasman eventually retired in Batavia, in what would later become Jakarta, and died in 1859. Number 2. Alfonso de Albuquerque. A Portuguese military officer, de Albuquerque became famous as Viceroy of Portuguese India in the early 16th century. He went to South Asia with the goals of fighting Muslims, spreading Christianity, and giving Portugal direct access to the spice markets of the Orient. Historians generally consider him the greatest naval commander of his generation, particularly leading the first European fleet to ever sail into the Red Sea. He also raided the coasts of the Persian Gulf, aimed at cutting off Muslim access to the sea lanes leading in and out of the Indian Ocean. Other highlights of his military career include the capture of Goa in 1510 and the capture of Malacca in 1511. Alfonso also proved his talents outside of the military as a civilian administrator. During his administration of Portuguese India, he opened up diplomatic relations with Burma, Ethiopia, Persia, Siam, and Timor. He also worked with Rafael Perestrello in getting Ming China to at least consider opening itself up for trade with Europe. De Albuquerque's various achievements earned him several epithets after his death, such as the Great or the Terrible. Some historians even describe him as the Caesar of the East, or the Lion of the Seas, and the Portuguese Mars. Number 3. Antonio de Abreu. A Portuguese officer who served under Alfonso de Albuquerque, de Abreu lived between the late 15th and early 16th centuries. He became famous for commanding an expedition in 1511 to search for the fabled Spice Islands. With help from native Malays, de Abreu managed to make his way to what would become Indonesia. He explored the Lesser Sunda Islands, as well as Java and Ambon Island, before reaching the Bunda Islands in 1512. There, he managed to secure a cargo of nutmeg and cloves before returning to Malacca to report his success to de Albuquerque. De Abreu planned to return to Portugal afterward and later left for home in January 1513. Unfortunately, he died from unclear causes before he could arrive, dying on the Azores Islands. Number 4. Bartolomeu Dias. One of the most famous explorers of them all, Dias came from 15th century Portugal. Even before becoming an explorer in his own right, Dias served in various trading expeditions to and from West Africa. He may even have served in Diogo Cao's first expedition to the Congo between 1482 and 1484. In 1486, however, Dias set out on his famous voyage with sanction from King John II of Portugal. The king wanted a sea route to the Orient, with the land routes blocked by the Ottoman Empire. In turn, the Venetians monopolized any trade between Europe and the Ottoman Empire. The king and his advisors wondered if they could find that route by going around Africa to the south. Dias left Lisbon in July 1487 and hopped his way down the African coast to reach the Cape of Good Hope in May 1488. He originally called it the Cape of Storms for the bad weather at the time, but the king renamed it to its modern name instead. Diaz himself received a Nobel title in recognition of his achievements, and later went on a voyage to Brazil, and then India. Ironically, Diaz died on the way back home, when his ship sank in a storm off the Cape of Good Hope in 1500. Number 5. Christopher Columbus. The most famous explorer of them all, if not the most infamous depending on who you asked. An Italian explorer who served under King Ferdinand II and Queen Isabella I of Spain, Christopher Columbus discovered the New World in 1492. Specifically, he landed in the Bahamas, on the island he called Hispaniola, the exact location of which remains argued among historians today. He explored several other islands in the Caribbean Sea in succeeding expeditions, before landing in Central America in 1502. Columbus, though, fell into royal disfavor in 1502 for his poor service as a colonial governor. He also proved himself cruel even by the standards of the time, leading to his arrest and return to Spain. Columbus today has a mixed historical reputation. On one hand, his discovery of the Americas led the way to the exploration and colonization of the Western Hemisphere. But on the other hand, it also enabled the slavery and genocide of the Native Americans. Thanks for watching.